Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another Freeform Friday for our Geezerology channel. Today, Bob is going to tell us his thoughts on the Beatles' Get Back, which he did watch over the weekend. This was released in three parts, as everybody knows, and three parts on Disney Plus over the Thanksgiving weekend. And Bob was tasked with watching this thing and giving us a review of it, so we can get one up pretty quick. We'll probably come back later after Dee and I have a chance to watch it and probably have a panel discussion on it at some point. But right now, Bob's going to give us some first impressions while it's still fresh. Bob, take it away, buddy.
All righty, thank you, Scotty. Okay, before I get into this thing, I need to do a full disclosure. I did not watch this documentary in its entirety, and it was advertised as being 6 hours of material. It's actually closer to eight, and I tried my best to be able to watch the entire thing, and I just couldn't do it. So I've watched most of it, but I did want to do up front that I have not been able to wade through it in its entirety. Um, as Scott said, it's spread across three episodes, and it started Thanksgiving Day, so we went Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And I made it through all of the first episode, which is 3 hours in length. And I managed to do that. I watched it for a while. I stepped away, came back and watched it, and I finally finished it. I made it about two-thirds of the way through the second episode, and then I did the last half of the third episode. I will tell you this: there are some absolutely mesmerizing moments in this documentary, and it is a fly-on-the-wall experience watching the Beatles um, record and work out and develop the Let It Be album. And they also started working on songs that ultimately wound up on the Abbey Road album. And there are parts of the creative process that it's just absolutely stunning to watch. You get to see Paul McCartney develop Get Back from nothing. He just sits there, and John Lennon is late to the studio, so McCartney sits there and he starts strumming his bass guitar, and he's strumming just the basic rhythm to Get Back, and he's kind of noodling along with it, and he develops the melody, and he's just kind of singing nonsense stuff, and then you suddenly see him develop the chorus of Get Back, and it's fascinating to watch that song start to develop. And then as you get further into it, you watch them try to come up with the lyrics. And Sweet Loretta Martin started out as Sweet Loretta Marsh, and they're coming up with all kinds of last names that didn't work, so it's really cool to watch them suddenly define Sweet Loretta Martin. And the song started out as a protest song against anti-immigration policies. So they start doing, all the political stuff in the studio. And same thing with watching him develop Let It Be and a lot of the other songs. Where it really drags is watching them for the 17th time start, and quit a song and come back and go back. And then they just get into endless debates about minute stuff. And it's hard, if you're a Beatles completist, you'll probably want to watch this thing all the way through. I'm not enough of a completist. I couldn't do it. Um, it's like I say, there are some moments that are just absolutely mesmerizing. You can see the tension developing between Lennon and McCartney and Harrison. And George Harrison brings in a couple songs to the studio. One of them is All Things Must Pass, and they just kind of like the other two just dismiss it. Then he brings in I Me Mine, and John Lennon is horribly insulting, to Harrison over that song, and just says, "Do you know what kind of band we're in? We're a rock and roll band," And then toward the end of the first episode, you can, they're in the studio practicing and working out these songs, and you can just see the look on Harrison's face. He's just, I've had it, and he gets up and says, "I quit. I'm leaving the band. See you boys at the club." and that ends the first episode. But you can just see that building through there. Um, and then the second episode starts with efforts to try to get Harrison to come back into the band. And there are several meetings that they have with Harrison. Those aren't filmed, but ultimately he does come back. And before he returns, John Lennon shows up, and he and Paul McCartney go off into the cafeteria to have a private meeting. Well, that wasn't filmed, but the people doing this documentary movie put a hidden microphone in a flower vase. So Lennon and McCartney's conversation was being recorded without them knowing about it. And they do some very candid stuff where they talk about the way they've treated Harrison and all the things. And that part was really fascinating to hear them talk to each other, without knowing they're being recorded. Harrison does come back, and then Billy Preston joins them. And Billy Preston just dropped in to say hello because he happened to be in London. And they recruit him to start recording in the studio with them because they were planning on overdubbing, keyboards later. So they convinced Billy Preston to join them, and he just makes a huge difference there in the recording studio with his presence and the way he animates everything. And of course, he joins them for the famous rooftop concert. One thing I learned that I did not know, and I'm almost kind of embarrassed to admit this, I did not know that several cuts on the Let It Be album actually came from the rooftop performance.
Oh,
I
yeah.
just, I did not know that. And I don't know why I didn't know that. It's kind of embarrassing to admit, but that's something that I learned. Um, One of the things that's coming out of this documentary is they're saying that it's proof that Yoko Ono wasn't the cause for the Beatles breaking up. Yoko is there with them every time that they're in the studio, but she's just sitting next to John Lennon. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't do anything. She's reading a newspaper or knitting or things like that. And there's one point where at the beginning of the second episode, John hasn't arrived to the studio yet. So they're sitting around and they're actually having a candid conversation about Yoko being there. And, McCartney, says, well, they're in love. They want to be together. And he, at one point, he says, I think that John's reached a point where, if he had to choose between Yoko and the Beatles, it would be Yoko. And then McCartney makes a comment that just reverberates at this time. He said, what are we going to have people 50 years from now saying, oh, the band broke up because she sat on an amp, And, but I think though that there was some tension with everybody by her being there because McCartney makes a comment. Let me back up a second. They had lost their manager, Brian Epstein, a couple years before this, and they were still reeling from that loss because at one point they're talking in there and they considered him their father figure. And after he died, they were kind of rudderless and they started managing themselves. And McCartney stepped into being the leader. And it was a role that the other people didn't like him doing, and he apparently didn't even like it for himself. And he mentions a couple times how, we're not really disciplined and we need a father figure. And then later on, when they're talking about Yoko and he's sitting around with everybody else, he says, yeah, if we had a real father figure, it would be somebody who would say, okay, wives and girlfriends stay out of the studio. And so that was probably the only negative comment about Yoko. You do notice that like Linda Eastman showed up a couple times, and this was before she married McCartney, but she stays away from them. She's not there when they're working on their music and stuff. She's maybe taking some pictures, and then Ringo's wife is there a couple times, but Yoko is like joined at the hip with John. And when they start officially recording the songs, they would lay a track down and then go into the studio to listen to it, and she's right there in the studio with them when they're all crammed in there listening, to the recorded product. If I was a member of the band, I would probably be a little resentful of her being there, but a lot of people are saying this documentary proves that she really wasn't the cause of their breakup. And there are some times when, um, Paul talks about how he and John, well, there's one part where John's off by himself and he's being filmed, and he talks about how he and Paul aren't writing together the way they used to. And he attributes part of that to, like, they're not together all the time like they were when they were young and they were all living together and everything. So, Paul's writing his stuff, John's writing his stuff, then they try to come together. So, they were growing apart as songwriters. Then you see the resentment of Harrison, because he felt like he wasn't being taken seriously by the other two. Ringo is Ringo, he's just going with the flow, and is the guy who's always seems to be happy and everything. So, like I say, there are parts of it that are just absolutely mesmerizing to watch, but they had 60 some odd hours of video footage, and I forgot how many hours of audio they said they had. So, they picked a director to do this who is known for, you know, uh, taking 3 hours to tell a 2 hour story in these movies. So, I think that it would be much more enjoyable had they cut a lot of the stuff out. Because, like I say, you see endless footage, of them all talking about the most minute things. And so the part that I probably enjoyed the most out of this was the third segment where they showed the entire rooftop concert, and and you see a split screen thing where you'll see them on the roof, and then maybe you see crowd shots from the street. They interview people who are watching it, and they interview a cross section of people from young contemporary Londoners to the older generation. And it was kind of remarkable how many of the older people actually thought, hey, this is really cool, and I like this, and I like the Beatles. There were some who were very grumpy about it. There was one lady who said, it woke me up from my nap, and I'm not happy. The police showed up, and I read later on that they were actually anticipating the cops were probably going to show up. So they installed a see-through mirror so they could keep an eye on the cops and watch everything else at the same time. And they assigned a film crew, to follow the cops and everything. So that was very enjoyable to watch the entirety of that rooftop concert. And I've seen bits and pieces of it. But this is the first time I saw it in its entirety. I recommend watching it. It is, like I say, there are times when it's absolutely mesmerizing. There is a lot of padding, in my opinion, so there's a lot to wade through. Um, I plan on sometime maybe going back and trying to pick up, the pieces that I couldn't get through. I probably have about 2 hours or so to watch that I didn't see the first time around. Um, Sadly, you can't fast forward through it looking for the good stuff because you don't know where the good stuff is going to pop up. But it is fascinating. I learned a lot about the Beatles, and the like I said, the fly on the wall thing in the studio was really cool. I suspect that the recording of an album is like this. There's a lot of hurry up and then quit, hurry up and quit, and sitting around and endlessly repeating stuff, trying to find the right groove and everything. And after a while, that kind of loses its luster to watch. All right, but overall, I would definitely recommend it. If you can wade through the time, you're going to find some absolute brilliant things to watch. So that's
I
my
get
take on it.
I get the impression that this would probably be something that like a musician would probably enjoy it from front to back, because a musician knows this world and knows how these things work, or at least have a sense of what this was all about. uh, Maybe the general public and those who aren't like I say, who aren't complete Beatles fans, who don't need to know every little detail about the Beatles and everything like that. It probably wasn't meant for them. I don't know. I haven't watched it, and I've lost my desire to see it just because I originally thought, well, this started out as supposed to be a feature film, about a 2.5 hour feature film.
Mm.
And it eventually, and Peter Jackson eventually grew and grew and grew and grew over some things. But I thought up until last week that this was 3 2 hour episodes. And then I think you were the first one who told me, no, this is like each episode is like 2.5 hours or so. And there's a total of like 8 or so hours. And it's like, I lost my desire to run off and see this thing because of that. And I've gotten sucked in by Peter Jackson before. It's like I got sucked in. I kept hearing all these great things about these Lord of the Ring movies, and so I went and watched the first Lord of the Rings movie, and it was torturous to me. Just because Peter Jackson he doesn't know when to quit.
Was like, the whole premise behind this thing is the Beatles had set a very tight deadline to do to put this album in the can, and they were wanting to cap it off with a live TV appearance. So there's this endless debate about where they're going to do this TV appearance. And some of the band wanted to do it in England. The documentary filmmakers, they were set on going to Africa to do it, and they wanted to go to Libya where there was this ancient Colosseum type thing, and they wanted to do it there. Ringo was dead set about going out of the country. Then they said, but we only want an English audience if we go to Africa. So then there was this debate about maybe we could put a bunch of people on a boat and take them there. So there's just endless discussions about this. And you're sitting there going, we know you freaking didn't do it. Why do we need to see hour upon hour upon hour of discussion about it? You could have, I think you could have condensed some of those things down, and maybe even, I don't necessarily want a talking head type thing, but find some way to tell that story in a couple minutes and then move on, and give us more of that incredible interaction amongst these four men in the studio, and you can see that they, despite the growing tensions, they still had a love for each other. And you see some of their personalities coming out, and I wanted to see more of that. Maybe some more of the creative process without getting bogged down in all of this endless little, talks about things that I think ultimately really weren't that important.
Yeah, that's the whole, to me, that's the whole Peter Jackson thing, is that he doesn't know how to make things concise. He seems to think that every little thing is important, and it's not. It's a whole, and my training as an editor, as a publications editor, as a newspaper editor, uh just that kind of stuff bothers me. It's like, you don't need this, just whack it, just just tell your story.
Tell the story. Now,
Yeah,
I will give him props for, he did a beautiful job of restoring the footage, and the sound and the audio is excellent. So he did do a good job there, but there's just too much bloat in this, and that really disappointed me. And like I say, I forced myself to make it all the way through the first episode. I tried really hard on the second one, and on the third one, I said, I want to see the rooftop concert. So I fast forwarded until they started that, and I watched all of that, and that to me was awesome. I thoroughly enjoyed that part of it. But I grew really tired of the endless dialogue coming out of the studio.
maybe what I'll do is I'll just watch the third episode, because the rooftop concert is what I want to see, because I've seen it. I saw the original Let It Be documentary a couple of times back in the day. It's been a lot of years, and I think YouTube also has, or at least at one point, you could find the rooftop concert from the Let It Be film on YouTube. I don't know if it's still there or not, but But I understand that they only used about half of that in the original Let It Be film, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
well, yes, and also the rooftop concert is 40 some odd minutes long, I believe, but they only did like three songs, and they actually did them multiple times,
right, right,
and they ended it with the police up on the roof, and somebody points out to the band that, hey, the cops are up here, so they start ad libbing "Get Back," and I hadn't seen this before, so they're ad libbing "Get Back," and the McCartney sings "Sweet Sweet Loretta, you're up on the roof again," and the cops are here and stuff. So like I said, they only did three or four songs, and they actually did them a couple of times, so it was almost like hey, we're looking for the best takes, and
got it.
so yeah,
Yeah,
so yeah.
yeah,
So like I say, that part was really fascinating to watch, and I enjoyed that tremendously. Remember something, this is Peter Jackson's version of what happened here. And he's got his own take on this. And even though it's 8 hours long, they had 60 hours of video footage. So we have no idea what Jackson omitted. So there could be a whole nother take on this floating out there somewhere. So if you do wade through all 8 hours, remember, take it with a grain of salt.
yeah. So there's enough. There's enough there. Let's see what Tarantino could do with this, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We'd have a whole new movie with all that footage. Okay. Well, thanks everybody. We'll be back on Wednesday with a Wednesday spotlight with a panel discussion of something or other. And we'll be back then next Friday with another review with a Freeform Friday. So thanks again for joining us, everybody. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, give us a comment, and we will talk to you later. So
All
long.
right, take care.